But that's the kind of stigma they have, right? A lot of these women have. They feel like they have to stay for the kids.
Yeah. I don't know that men... did you read much about men having that same sentiment?
No, actually not. A lot of this
interesting.
research I read... A lot of this research I read, or articles, opinion articles I read across culture, women usually takes on a lot more social pressure than men. The stigma towards women is definitely more heavily, like, way worse.
I like salad. Do you like salad?
Welcome to Canadian Salad,
a fun, factual, and friendly podcast about culture and integration in Canada.
I'm one of your hosts. I'm Ho Shen Ho from China, currently living in Vancouver, unceded territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
And I'm your other host, Andrea McCoy, an immigrant from the United States, broadcasting you from the unceded traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations.
And you're listening to Canadian Salad!
Hey everyone, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Another
How's
Tuesday, another
doing?
Episode. I know.
I
Let's
know.
listen. Let's see if anyone says anything. Oh, they sound like they're really good. There's some people that aren't doing so well, but
I think people are saying hi back, which is important.
it is. Yeah. We'll say hi back. Hello. We're doing this sober. Yes.
We are doing it very sober, by the way. We are absolutely sober. There's no other reason why we act this way.
Not at all. Not at all. Except that we're really fun and amazing. But yes,
we
welcome.
are fun.
We are fun. And welcome to a new episode. We're going to unpack a kind of a cultural tour of relationships. But we've done relationship episodes before, but this particular relationship episode is on the more separation side. Hoshin, do you want to maybe unpack a little summary of what we're going to talk about?
Yeah. So today we're going to explore the diverse cultural perspectives on separation and divorce, see how different culture, different countries, culturally how they view divorce and how legally you go through the divorce process. Especially in many cultures, there's huge differences on men and women.
Yes. I would like to say my theory is that women are often the ones who don't have a lot to say, and they're quite disadvantaged in relationships where separation occurs. But I guess we'll see if that's true from this episode.
Wow, you're very true. I think a lot of us can assume that. Yes, women are often in a very disadvantaged place. For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when someone told you that they divorced, what do you usually think about? Personal biases.
Personal biases. Oh, I grew up with very anti-divorce sentiments growing up in the church. You stay with your person. God hates divorce. All of this kind of stuff. And then when my own father went through a divorce, it really, when you understand or begin to unpeel the layers into why someone needs to leave a relationship, your judgment and kind of your very hard line assumptions about that person and their decision to have a divorce gets thrown out the window because it is complicated and people have their very unique lives and unfortunately, their circumstances. Not everyone should be married, and they make this decision maybe swiftly, or maybe they made it consensually, but over time people change. So it got thrown on my head when my dad went on his divorce, and now I don't think anything about it other than it's a really emotional process. And so how about you?
When I was in China, for sure, that divorce is like a bad thing, even though, to be honest, I don't think I know anyone when I was living there, anyone around me, like relatives wise, were divorced. But then my parents divorced. And then I remember my mom told me one time, like after her divorce, she told me that she said she's sorry. She didn't mean to bring us such shame and ask for my blessing for the divorce. I was like, no, you don't need my blessing for the divorce. I'm glad you did. So I think there's definitely a lot of still stigma for the woman, at least, about going through a divorce or bringing shame to the family and dragging family through the mud by all this social pressure. So I think, yeah. So I think that's what I can experience when I was living there. But living here, of course, is very different. And I know many people, some of them, even my peers, already divorced at the age of 30. So that I think marriage and divorce definitely weigh more loosely, which I think is not really a surprise comparing the Western and Eastern cultural differences. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. That is interesting, though, that both of us, even though we grew on opposite sides of the planet, we both had these negative, at least we grew up with negative stereotypes or stigmas around divorce. And it came down to our own personal experiences with our parents to flip that on its head. So we have so much more in common than we have apart. It's amazing, Ocean.
We always do, I think.
Oh my gosh.
We think so. We call it conservative values.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, today we're going to go take a little trip on the globe and see how other culture sees divorce. Of course, we're going to make very general assumptions and generalizations in some of these, but we're also going to bring up some culture or country as examples when we talk about these kind of big cultural groups. So let's go dive into the Western societies first.
Yes.
Which is, I think both of us should be familiar about this. In the West, there's marriage in many ways. I definitely have a huge emphasis on personal freedom and fulfillment. And if you no longer feel like you fulfill in a marriage and or feel trapped or whatever, it's very common for people to seek divorce. And this kind of no-fault divorce laws are very common in a lot of countries, especially in the UK. And there's definitely stigmas around divorce have been declining. But of course, the process, no matter it's emotional or legal, still remains a bit difficult for people to navigate. I want to talk about specifically UK. UK had, I believe, one of the first countries to have a no-fault divorce law. Means you can just go to the court and say, I want a divorce. You don't need to provide any specific reason why.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of countries that you need to just say, oh, he cheated or she no longer can fulfill marital responsibilities, blah, blah, blah. But in some countries like the UK, you could just go and say, I want a divorce. As long as both people sign it, it's fine. You don't need to necessarily have to have legal reasons of why they cannot be in a marriage.
Interesting. Yeah. I think we're going to get to Canada, but yeah, I have a few comments about, even though the law says this is okay, I find that in friends or even in circles that I come across, quite often the courts will almost always favor the men in the marriage as far as settlement. And especially if there's kids involved, women have to do, and especially women of color or Indigenous women, really have to prove to the courts why their children should stay with them, even though it's a quote unquote not a healthy home because both parents are not there. So I think there is a kind of a lazier, maybe a declining stigma, as you said. But when it comes to the courts and if there's abuse and if there's children involved, it gets really imbalanced. And the courts, I think, are still caught up in the misogynistic mindset.
Yeah. In terms of the legal process of separation, about whether there's financial assets or kids, a high percent a possibility that if this kid's involved, is usually the mother who gets to have the kids. And money-wise, that is really different. That is definitely depends on, if the mother is like a housemaker, does even put that woman in an even worse situation if they never really make money before. The courts would think that they have no economic ability to provide, for example. That's some of the cases I read when I was doing the research. But of course, I think there's also country to country might be different, case to case may be different. But definitely, in general, women tend to be put in a less advantage kind of place in terms of kids and financial assets after the divorce. But that's a legal part of it. But there's also like a rising kind of cases in very amicable separations that lead to like co-parenting. For example, a lot of parents after divorce is to decide co-parenting rather than one take care of the other. A lot of them don't even need to go to court to argue who get to do what, see how many days to see the kids, because a lot of parents will go into co-parenting and therapy to make sure they can both equally fulfill their parenting responsibilities. So that's definitely in the West. This kind of amicable divorce and separations are very more and more common now.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Exactly. And then next we're gonna go to South and Southeast Asia, where religion are very prominent, which influence the divorce and separation, obviously. When we talk about South and Southeast Asia, usually Hinduism, Catholicism, and Islamic really present in those areas. So this kind of strong religion influence is definitely there. Divorce is really rare and heavily stigmatized, especially for women, obviously. Some countries don't even have the legal frameworks to support these separations. For example, divorce is illegal in the Philippines.
It is.
Yeah, is illegal. And also as the main reason why a lot of these countries in these regions have really low divorce rate. India has one of the lowest in the world. Only 0.1 people in 1,000 people are
Wow.
divorced. Yeah.
Wow. But because of that, maybe more the religious, or even just the fact that legally there is no place if someone wanted to end a relationship, they really can't go anywhere.
Exactly.
Got you.
Yeah. In India, for example, there is legal proceedings for divorce, but again, it's the societal pressure that makes people stay in the relationship, especially for women. If they divorce, a lot of them will not get anything, and also had to face social pressure. But in the Philippines, it's not the case. In the Philippines, just there's no divorce unless you are Muslim. If you're Muslim in Philippines, you have specific laws that you can pursue to ask to seek for divorce. But if you're not, then it's almost impossible.
But that's more like a religious law as opposed to a kind of a national law or social law.
You mean
is correct? Yeah, in
divorce?
Islam. Yeah.
Yeah, in Islam, in the Philippines, yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. But the national law is just illegal unless you can prove that the marriage, even at the beginning of it, is invalid, like annulment. In some sense, you can do an annulment, but you can't get a divorce. So there's a lot of these kinds of stigma, especially if you have kids. The social pressure even stronger because you're expected to stay together for the kids no matter how unhappy you are. Very common.
Yeah.
And even family will shame you if you divorce.
Yeah. That I see some of that happening in the West, maybe not to the extreme that maybe some of these other countries, because they're more collective and there is more honor shame components of culture. But even my dad stayed together with my mom for many years because they didn't want to disrupt our childhood, but it almost made it worse because they were always fighting. So there is this, if you are caught up in that maybe religious framework or that social stigma, no, we'll stay together for the kids. I don't think you realize actually that staying together is actually harmful.
Even worse. I agree. My mom also told me she stayed in the relationship as long as she did is because of us. I was just like, don't say that. It was actually horrible for us. I prefer you to divorce even earlier than that.
Yeah. And hindsight, you just never know what will happen.
But that's the kind of stigma they have, right? The kind of the ideology a lot of these women have. They feel like they have to stay for the kids.
Yeah. I don't know that men... did you read much about men having that same sentiment?
No, actually not. A lot of this research I read, or articles, opinion articles I read are mostly, talking about women, that the social pressure. I definitely think across culture, women usually takes on a lot more social pressure than men. The stigma towards women is definitely more heavily, like, way worse. Let's just say that. Than men. Yeah. Just in general, how across culture, across the globe. Yeah. So patriarchy is across the globe.
It is. Hashtag we can do it, women.
We can. Yes, woman, let's go. The other one I want to explore is East Asia. East Asia actually not that much different compared to South Asia and Southeast Asia in terms of stigma. There's a kind of social pressure to stay in the relationship, especially for kids as well. And there's definitely this kind of emphasis for harmony. Culturally, they want things to be harmony, and then have this emphasis on your duty as a family member. I think about Mulan, I have to bring honor to us all. It's got family duty. When it goes to parents, it's wow, they're supposed to be provider, to be protector. They're supposed to stay together, maintain whatever harmony is. There should not be fighting. There should not be separations. So divorce, even though there's like legal proceeding in all East Asia, all the countries like China, Japan, and South Korea, but it's still very frowned upon in a lot of circles. In bigger cities, the stigma tends to be lighter, of course.
Sure.
But in like rural area especially, it's very bad. And also younger generation tend to be more loosey-goosey towards these kind of traditions about you have to stick together for harmony, for family duty. So younger generation definitely are pushing it back. I found this article from The Guardian actually was talking about this growing number of women in China celebrates post-divorce independence.
Oh, fun. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I love it.
Exactly.
See, women,
Yeah, the woman,
we can do this.
that they don't need no man. They just want to celebrate the independence.
Yeah, I think a big component of that, as much as you hear about, Gen whatever, the younger generations, they have no regard for traditions or family or whatever. It's no, their response is out of living through toxic relationships. There's a reason they're kicking back is because it was harmful. They saw their parents struggle. They saw what it was they experienced a childhood that was really unhappy. So yeah, it doesn't come from just, we're just going to rebel and it's no, there's some serious components of why people push back.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. But in Japan, it's very different, actually. Japan and China are very close to each other, but then Japan only has half the divorce rate as in China.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in Japan, the article I read, at least, there's a kind of heavier emphasis on kind of harmony, which leads to high marital dissatisfaction. People will stay in a relationship despite even sometimes even abuse. They will stay into it because of many components like saving face, or it's common for women to not work. And then to stay at home. And then a lot of them also, women will stay in the relationship worrying that if they divorce, they will get nothing, because a lot of them also worry that their family will not support them as well. Right. So a lot of them will stay in the relationship. And for men as well, a lot of them are just like live together in the same place with the married couple title, but do not fulfill any marital duty. A lot of them will stay in the relationship just as roommates.
Yeah, I have some friends who are from Japan, and I think I asked her one time, I was like, so you and your husband ever go on a date? And she just laughed and said, no. Oh, what do you guys like to do together? He works and I'm home with
the kids.
Yeah, there's not a lot of, and not to say that they seem like they're just really good friends, which is really neat. But yeah, it's a very different, and like you said earlier, it's very nuanced. Not all people from Japan are this way. Not all people from China are this way. If there are a large amount of patterns that research has shown, it does speak to just some relationships that I've observed and just the different way people even see marriage. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's very different there for sure, that people will stick together no matter how unhappy they are. Yeah. I think that's very different than here, obviously. Yes. Another area I want to talk about is Middle East and North Africa, where also one type of religion is quite common in that area. Islam is very common there, which divorce, even though it's permitted in Islam, but often male dominated, which also kind of explored. And women's right to divorce are limited and socially risky.
Sure.
And there's a specific word to divorce, for women to divorce in Islam. It's called kahul, Khul, which means the female, the woman seeks divorce. And then they have to return dowries to the husband and have to forego certain financial rights. So that means if the woman seeks divorce, she had to pay back the husband to take the payment and then divorce her.
Ooh, Yikes.
I know.
So unless you're from a wealthy family, you've got maybe parents on your side for this, I can see why women probably rarely, if ever, would initiate a
Rarely,
divorce.
yeah. Yeah, because again, you have to pay back the dowry, more or less the dowry where,
Wow.
the amount that the husband paid when paid to the female side when they got married, right? And only then, when the husband takes the payment, then the husband can agree on the divorce. And then, of course, any future financial rights you had on the family, one family financial assets, you will not have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of that, yes. And on top of that, as we mentioned, the social stigma for women, especially Islam is definitely very heavy, socially risky in the sense that some of them will even risk being abandoned by family or in communities, would not be welcome to come back if they see a divorced woman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And again, in more urbanized area, it tend to be easier because usually women in those areas are more educated. So the more rural and less educated area you go, the social stigma is definitely heavier.
Sure. Yeah. And I imagine with
That's-
education comes potentially job opportunities, which create that financial maybe independence or at least something to fall back on and not just a relationship or a man. But
yes, absolutely. So that's very different. That's definitely
Very
very
different.
different. I didn't know. To be honest, at the beginning, I thought women in Islam can divorce, but I didn't know there's a specific law for them to get
there's
divorced. But again,
there's some
they have to
conditions.
pay a price. I know.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
I know. Oh, not great. And then with last but not least, we're gonna go to Africa and indigenous cultures
Okay.
in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, and some other indigenous communities.
Okay.
And in these communities are very interesting. Divorce often handled within the traditional councils, not a legal court. And then usually if a couple got divorced, it's usually seen as a family or community issue more than just individual as a failure or situation.
I love that.
So yeah, if someone want to divorce with the council, the community, you had to seek counseling, like therapy even, probably. They never use the word therapy, but I assume that's what it's like to talk to your elders. And then the elder have to decide. So it's not just you.
I think what struck me there was the scene as maybe a like a community issue more than an individual failure. So I would imagine did we not support her well enough? How could we have done better to just support them as a couple? And were we not aware of these signs maybe earlier on? It's more of that communal kind of responsibility as opposed to just, you didn't make it work out. Well, then you get shamed because it's all on you because your marriage failed. Or I guess that community piece, because we all want the community, but I can see where if the culture and community is maybe more male dominated, women may not have that upper hand. There's still the imbalance.
It's still, this kind of community based, often a woman, is still in a disadvantage. Even though, like for example, in rural Kenya and Uganda, elders will mediate divorces. Like we'll see how, if they really decided to divorce and nothing we can do, and then they will mediate how it's going to go. And women often, in this kind of mediation, women often lose their custody of property. It still favor man, even though there is this kind of community-based divorce traditions.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
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 So,
but it's interesting that it's more of a community law or a kind of it's not going to any kind of rubber stamped court, but it's going to your local community.
the elder who
that
knows you.
Sure. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's very different there. And then some of the article I read also, some community also around the divorce, there was also collective healing and responsibilities for these communities to go to the divorced couple to help them go through or heal after divorce. So there's also that piece there, which I also find it very interesting.
Yeah. Again, though, that shared community responsibility. Hey, we know
care,
what's happened. We know that now she's not getting as much money when she was living with her husband. Let's bring over meals. Let's see how we can help financially support or whatever. I'm imagining things, but I can just see how much more, because in the West it's very individualistic. So once you're divorced and everyone's just like, oh, how you doing? Oh, great. Anyway, my day was, for women especially, for women especially, they have to go through the daily individualistic stigma that they experience because of that divorce. And they often have to do it on their own or in silo therapy sessions with one person, because there still is, I have a friend, she's been divorced, and it's just dating. There's still, with, particularly in our culture, if you've been divorced, people just see that very negatively. And so they don't necessarily value or see you as, I don't know, as someone that they would want to date because, oh, you've been divorced. It's kind of, oh, you've been marked. Oh, I don't know if I should date you. It's just, it's still, there's that negative stigma with women. I wouldn't say with men, because I know a lot of women who give divorced men a chance, but I know I have divorced friends who aren't given as many chances, and it's still very much embedded within us. But it's something that she often has to navigate by herself. She doesn't got community being like, hey, let's just be roommates. Let's just hang out and let's be this together. I don't know. It's just sad. It's sad because as much as
It is.
I think it was even our friend from our master's program who was born in Saudi but grew up in Jordan. I forget her name. Her name is escaping me. But the ways in which women are blamed for men either lusting or raping someone, like it's the same across the globe from her perspective. Like in the West, we still blame women for men's behavior. And in the North Africa, Middle East, they still blame women for men's behavior. So I feel like that is just a global thing earlier where you had said women, patriarchy is this kind of global thing.
Patriarchy is universal.
It's universal, and women
I think,
yeah.
Yeah, I think patriarchy is very universal. Some just are more in disguise. Some are just blatantly.
Packaged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same thing packaged very differently.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. And also the point about you said about women in the West, women and men see divorce very differently actually reminded me one of the articles I read when I do the research. I don't exactly remember the data, but the data says after a divorce, like divorced men, divorced women, the men are more likely to get married within the first 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And usually I have thoughts about that, but usually it's because the men just feel like they can get away with things. They don't seek any kind of therapy or counseling, whereas women are like, okay, that guy was a total narcissistic jerk, so I'm going to date me for a while. I'm going to really try to self-love. It's, I want to heal, or I want to, our guards are up more. Whereas men are just, I don't know, they're just command and conquer.
This one's failed. Look for the next one.
Exactly.
Let's go for the next one.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a different approach there.
Yeah.
But
sure.
anyway, thank everyone who go through this journey with me. We'll go through the club, look in different culture, how we see divorce. We have interesting viewpoints of every culture, how they see being in a relationship or trapped in a relationship.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thank you, Hoshin. It's very eye-opening, and I feel like if there's any takeaway I'm getting from this, it's just to take care of people, whether they're in a marriage or whether they're not, whether they're divorced or whether they're staying together.
Being married does not mean you're happy.
No, and being divorced doesn't mean you're happy either.
Exactly.
But thank you. This was really eye-opening. And then when you have cultures come together who have understandings of divorce, like I know in some cultures, if you say it 3 times to your wife, I want to get a divorce, you can get a divorce religiously. That's the religious law. But those particular cultures that are here in Canada have been told that would have worked back where you came from. But in Canada, you have to go to court, and you're going to have to pay child support, and you're going to have to do all this. And it is definitely, talking about immigrants and our Canadian salad experience, that is a big piece that I think is often ignored or at least invisible in the immigrant's journey, because again, our culture, our religions, our traditions, they definitely inform and shape how we view relationships. And when we come to Canada, it can be a very different reflection. So Yeah. Anyway, that's it. Yeah. So we are going to go forward to our last portion of this episode, the Canadian Salad Pop Quiz.
I
Ding,
love pop
ding.
quiz.
Me too. We're Hoshin and I. If you're new with us, thank you for joining us. We love having you here. Where Hoshin and I, in this portion, will actually answer and ask a question that neither of us know the answer to related to the topic of this podcast, this episode. So, Hoshin, would you like to go first?
Yes, I'd love to go
Okay.
first. My question is very related to this topic. Do you know the average marriage length in Canada based on 2020 Statistic Canada data?
The average length of a marriage
Yeah, in Canada, before divorce, obviously.
in Canada. I want to say 7 years.
7.
Yeah.
Oh, 7 years each.
Yes. Only because I read
Okay,
that
I read
around
it.
7 year mark, you'll start feeling like, oh my gosh, who's this bozo I'm with? Yeah. Anyway, am I right?
No, sorry, it's actually double that. It's a bit more than double, 15.3.
Really? That's okay. Interesting.
That's the average,
In Canada.
yeah, based on
Okay.
2020 Statistic Canada data. I was a bit slightly surprised too, 15.3.
Yeah, that's longer than I think I had read. I heard there's a 7 year itch, 10 year, and there's like a 16 year, but maybe it was an article from the US or something, not Canada. So.
Yeah, US had a higher divorce rate. Like US at 50. In US, really 50% of the marriage goes to divorce. In Canada, it's about 38.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. Are you ready for mine?
Yes.
Okay. My question to you is, of the global population, how much of the global population is polygamy illegal? So polygamy illegal, yes. How much of the global population where polygamy is illegal?
I don't know. I think it's less than 10%. I would have to assume. Maybe
Less-
5%.
Is illegal.
Illegal,
Polygamy is illegal in less than
yeah. Polygamy. I think
polygamy,
most
not
of them
monogamy.
Okay, sorry. I think most of them polygamy is illegal.
Yeah. So what percentage?
Maybe about 98% of them are illegal.
Okay. Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Okay. You are closer than your 10%. Approximately 75% of the global population are in countries where polygamy is illegal. So 75%. Yeah. So it's not as high.
So 25% of a population that they can do polygamy then.
Yes. Yes. So 25%. I would say Canada's in there. I think the US is there too. Maybe
Mormons are
UK. I don't know. But I don't know what country specifically, but this was just a snapshot.
Okay.
Yes, the data.
Good
The
to
data.
know.
We'll include the
Okay, now
links.
we'll learn something.
Yes, we'll include the links in our website. If you haven't checked out our beautiful mugs, our faces on our website, go to canadiansalad.ca and you'll be able to look at all the resources that Hoshin researched for this episode, as well as our quiz sources. You can learn more about us. And more importantly, you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which I'm a little behind on sending, but I'm going to send it. It's called Canadian Salad Snacks, and it's a overview of our most well listened to episodes, but also a sneak peek into our upcoming episodes. So we hope you'll go there, and then make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and Blue Sky. We've got some really great content, really juicy stuff, and yeah, very juicy sweet because salads are juicy. And we definitely deliver on that juiciness. Thank you, Hoshin. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, new and OG listeners alike. We love you. Thank you, and have a wonderful week. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Canadian Salad is written and produced in British Columbia, Canada by Hoshin Ho and Andrea McCoy. Theme music is by Naver Avetyan from Pixabay.
This has been a good Drinklin production.